Oh, glad you're here today. 855-839-1210 on X at Rich Zeoli. We're also watching in California as lawmakers there are debating Gavin Newsom's redistricting plan right now, which of course is totally illegal because the voters there passed a referendum. But Gavin Newsom's hair doesn't care, so Gavin Newsom's hair is going to do it anyway. And that's just that. By the way, we'll be joined by Jack Ciattarelli at 3:30 today. New poll out today in the Garden State shows this race is now in the single digits. Rutgers Eagleton has him down by 9, which means he's probably up by 4. That is the big story of the hour as we kick things off here, brought to you by Dr. Mike Veneria, veneriadental.com. When it comes to complex dental surgery, you don't go to the closest dentist, go to the best. That's Dr. Mike. Schedule your free implant consultation today at veneriadental.com, veneriadental.com. Well, let's begin, shall we, with that big ruling out of New York. So, I don't know if you remember, but Letitia James, the attorney general there, she had bragged at one point she would bring back a check from Trump worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, before I play that clip for you, I'd like to read for you what the president posted on his Truth Social account when the judges made their ruling in the New York Court of Appeals. All right? Now, this is kind of long, so buckle up, but it's worth it. It's worth every ounce of this. Here we go. Total victory. And a lot of this is all caps. I'm not going to bother telling you which words are all caps. I'll just try to emphasize it as best I can. Total victory in the fake New York State Attorney General Letitia James case. I greatly respect the fact that the court had the courage to throw out this unlawful and disgraceful decision that was hurting business all throughout New York State. Others were afraid to do business there. The amount, including interest and penalties, was over $550 million. It was a political witch hunt, in a business sense, the likes of which no one has ever seen before. This was a case of election interference by the city and state trying to show, illegally, that I did things that were wrong when, in fact, everything I did was absolutely correct and even perfect. Every single dollar was thrown out, even the penalties imposed on us by the corrupt judge, one of the most overturned in history, Arthur Engoron. I wasn't given a jury, and during the course of the trial, which lasted a long time, was not given one ruling in my favor. But worse than him, if that's possible, was Letitia James, a corrupt and incompetent attorney general, who only brought this case in order to hurt me politically. She is a Trump-deranged lunatic. They made me bond the outrageous sum, which never happened before, and which cost me millions of dollars a month. It should have never been allowed to happen, and everyone knew it. Importantly, the vote was 5-0. I am so honored by Justice David Friedman's great words of wisdom, which should be read by everyone. I would also like to thank the court for having the courage to make this decision, which is already going down as one of the worst business persecutions in the history of our country. Sadly, there are other cases against me that are equally disgraceful, including those headed up by corrupt judges like Juan Merchan, whose daughter collected millions of dollars in fees from crooked Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, while her father shockingly refused to recuse himself from a vicious and corrupt trial, which is also under appeal, one in which every legal pundit in New York said there was no case. Even editorial boards said, do not do this. Judge Merchan gave me an unprecedented gag order, not letting me talk about him or his daughter or the fact that the appellate judges thought he should not be doing the case, but he did it anyway. Many lawyers said that his daughter and him created the greatest conflict of interest they had ever seen. Judge Lewis Kaplan, the other remaining case, whose wife, family, and friends attended his 2 trials, is as mean and nasty as anyone I have ever met. That case, also on appeal, should also never have been brought, and he should be admonished for abuse and every other thing that can be thrown at a corrupt judge. He loved the publicity and would not let us present the irrefutable evidence that we wanted to present. This Clinton-appointed judge should not be allowed to get away with this scam. Okay. You remember there was not a single victim in this case. Not a one. Not a single victim in this case. Nobody complained. Nobody. In fact, everybody testified that they all made money and that they were happy and that they would do business with Donald Trump again. Now, Fox News' coverage of this is very different from the New York Times coverage of this. The New York Times coverage of this, which I'll share with you, and I absolutely love this. So if you read the New York Times case, it says the following. Divided court eliminates Trump's $500 million fine in fraud case. Divided court. It was a 5-0 ruling. Now, I'm no math guy. And granted, I know that I sometimes mess up numbers. But I know 5-0 when I see it. I know what love is, Jenny. I know what 5-0 is. I know what 0-5 is. I know what 5-0 is from the sense of 5-0. And I know what it means when you go 5-0. It means a cop. As in like Hawaii 5-0. Or when you're driving and your buddy goes 5-0. It means there's a cop hiding. So I don't know how a divided court comes up with a 5-0 ruling. Now, there is some division in the ruling as to regards to eliminating the fact that they found fraud. That now goes to the New York State Supreme Court. But one could write in the headline, unanimous court opinion waives, relieves, vacates $500 million fine in fraud case. I mean, you could do that if you wanted to. If you're the New York Times, you could do that. In a majority opinion, that is what we call unanimous. 5-0, which last time I checked is not divided. Now, I know how to divide 5. It never works out evenly. So it's either 3-2 or 4-1 or 2-3 or, yeah, those are basically your options, I think, as far as I know. But 5-0, not one of those options. Again, I'm not a math guy. So the New York Times article goes on to say, New York appeals judges said that the judgment was excessive but agreed to uphold the case so the appeal could continue. A divided New York appeals court on Thursday threw out a $500 million judgment against President Trump, eliminating an enormous financial burden while preserving the fraud case against him, a remarkable turn in the battle between the president and one of his fiercest foes. Okay? Now, let's contrast that with how Fox News wrote it. An appellate court has thrown out the $500 million civil fraud penalty against President Donald Trump in the high-profile case brought by New York Attorney General Letitia James. The New York Appellate Division overturned the penalty, ruling the disgorgement was an excessive fine that violates the Eighth Amendment. The 5-member panel all upheld findings that Trump and his company were liable, affirming that James acted within her authority and that injunctive relief to curb Trump organization practices was appropriate. The ruling leaves liability intact, but eliminates the massive financial penalty of $364 million plus interest, which rises to around $500 million. Now, I will share a little bit about what the judge wrote in the majority opinion. Friedman wrote that James' true aim was a political, this is Justice David Friedman. He issued a partial dissent, but upheld the 5-0 ruling. James' true aim was political and argued the entire case should be dismissed. Her ultimate goal was not market hygiene, but political hygiene, ending with the derailment of President Trump's political career and the destruction of his real estate business. He blasted James' use of Section 6312 of New York's executive law, which gives the state attorney general broad power to pursue civil fraud claims. He wrote that it was unprecedented and political, giving James essentially limitless power to prosecute her political enemies. He wrote that Trump's business deals involved sophisticated parties who profited without harming the public, and concluded he would reverse the judgment and dismiss the complaint. Section 6312 has never been used in the way it is being used in this case, namely to attack successful private commercial transactions negotiated at arm's length between highly sophisticated parties fully capable of monitoring and defending their own interests. All parties to these private transactions profited handsomely from the deals, from which there was no discernible negative effect on the public interest. Because the judges were split on liability, the case is now likely headed to New York's highest court, the Court of Appeals. James confirmed her intention to appeal the ruling in a statement, saying she was doing so to protect the rights and interests of New Yorkers. Not a single New Yorker was screwed out of a dollar or a dime or a single red cent. I don't really know if you can say anymore, only because I don't know if they're still making pennies. I hope they do. Also racism. I don't know. The court upheld the injunctive relief we won, limiting Donald Trump and the Trump Organization's officers' ability to do business in New York. It should not be lost to history. Yet another court has ruled that the president violated the law and that our case has merit. Well, hopefully the Supreme Court of New York will officially toss this thing once and for all and for good. And that'll be the end of it. And that'll be that. But I will tell you that from the perspective of a guy who's very, very smart and knows the law quite well, and that's Jonathan Turley. Do we have that one, Matt? Turley? This is how he broke it down today. And I think Jonathan Turley is one of the smartest minds out there when it comes to this. Take a listen.
Well, Aisha, thank you for having me on. This is obviously a tremendous victory for President Trump, but it's long overdue. During this litigation, many of us described this entire effort as a grotesque use of this New York law. No one lost money in this case. The banks actually wanted more business from President Trump. No one had ever seen an effort like this. It was an effort by Letitia James to have a trophy win against Trump. And what this opinion has done is to reduce what was a mounted marlin to something of a guppy. I mean, it has removed the fine and left in place the injunctive relief that President Trump can now appeal. So it is possible that even that could go to the wayside. The good news is really for the New York court system. This regains some of the credibility that was lost during this process. I mean, many of us stood there in disbelief that James was allowed to do this. She succeeded in securing, or she was fortunate enough to secure, a very favorable judge, Judge Engoron. And I want to note, by the way, that both the judge and James tried to effectively price Trump out of even appealing the case.
Yeah, and that's the other thing, too, about that, is that this ridiculous penalty, this $354 million plus penalties plus interest amounting to about $500 million was so egregious, so ridiculous, so out of the realm of normalcy that it violated the Eighth Amendment to the Constitution, the excessive fines clause of the United States Constitution. But let's think about Letitia James as a person, and I don't even want to equate her as being a member of the human race, because she's a disgusting political animal. I really hate prosecutors who use their office to go after their political enemies. I hate it from the very being of my core. I find it to be so obnoxious and disgusting. Every ounce of it is just gross and vile. And I really hate it. I hate it. And Letitia James ran on this, ran on stopping Trump. And the judge in the case put a gag order on the defendant. Now, gag orders are done to protect the rights of the defendant, but to put a gag order on the defendant when the government is coming after you and you're a candidate running for president of the United States of America and you can't explain to the voters why the government's coming after you? I mean, even the ACLU, and I hate to give them credit, but even the ACLU had problems with that. And it took a lot for the ACLU to have to acknowledge that this was a violation of President Trump's First Amendment rights and his Fifth Amendment rights and just every other right, just the right to basic decency. Here's the government accusing you of a crime and you don't have the right to speak out and to say anything on your behalf as you're seeking the highest office in the land. And it doesn't matter what office in the land or whether you're seeking that office or not, but I think it adds to the fact of why they were trying to silence him. And he couldn't explain to voters why they're coming after him. So it was an egregious violation of his First Amendment rights, an egregious violation of his Fifth Amendment rights, an egregious violation of his Sixth Amendment rights, an egregious violation of everything. And then they slap on this ridiculous fine. And again, it's worth saying, again, there were no victims in this case. No one, not a single person said they lost any money. They all said they'd do business with Trump again. Didn't matter. You had a completely victimless crime here. But you had a prosecutor who was hell-bent on going after somebody. Show me the man, I'll show you the crime. You've heard that saying before? This is a great example of that. Letitia James ran on that very, very point. You show me the man, I'll find you the crime. And she did. But it wasn't a crime. So they had to find a crime. So they just scoured the books and looked at all of Donald Trump's businesses. And they just found this and said he inflated things. The banks never complained. The mortgage companies never complained. The insurance companies never complained. No one complained. No one complained, period. The state of New York went after him and prosecuted him simply because of who he was. Simply because Donald J. Trump was a Republican seeking the presidency. And then the judge would not allow him to speak in the court of public opinion. So they went after him in the court of law, and they would not allow him to defend himself in the court of public opinion as he was seeking people's votes in the court of public opinion. Literally, that's what politics is. Politics is the court of public opinion. Literally. Here's Letitia James. Flashback when she bragged that she would bring back a check from Trump for hundreds of millions of dollars. This is September 21st, 2023 at the Congressional Black Caucus Annual Legislative Conference, Cut 2.
And that is why I will be honored when I walk into that courtroom on October 2nd. Well, my role is civil. But I will come back before you soon with a check for $250 million. And to let you know that he is no longer allowed to do business in the state of New York. Yeah, we've got a special charge to show up and stand up for one another.
Now, I have no doubt in my mind that Letitia James would want to go after Donald Trump for purely political reasons, and she's going to keep fighting. Okay, we have Jack Zeoli coming up, so let me take a quick break here. But listen, you can book your next office, bachelor, bachelorette, or private party at Bob's Little Sport Shop in Glassboro, New Jersey, and a big event coming up this weekend. That's right. It is their co-ed shooting event Sunday, August 24th at 1 p.m. Bob's also offers private and group lessons on introduction to firearms, firearm shooting, cleaning classes as well. Bob's instructors are certified NRA and range safety officers. Firearms ID cards are not required for anyone attending events, and no previous experience is necessary. Bob's also hosts women and co-ed shooting events throughout the year for new shooters or anyone interested in learning about proper firearm ownership. Visit bobslittle.sportshop.com or call them at 856-881-7575. Bob's Little Sports Shop in Glassboro, New Jersey can be the place for you to book your next office, bachelor, bachelorette, or private party. That's right. They offer both men and women trained instructors, private and closed events that can host up to 30 people, and no alcohol or drugs permitted on premises, obviously, but you can have some shooting range fun. And come out this Sunday, August 24th at 1 p.m. for their co-ed shooting event. Bob'sLittleSportShop.com. This ad sponsored by Bob's Little Sports Shop.